All right, so today we're taking a deep dive into what makes digital design tick.
Oh, sounds intriguing. What have we got?
A document packed with practical design micro-learnings, straight from the experience of Christian Slegtenhorst.
Years of design know-how all distilled into this one document.
Precisely, it's like a cheat sheet for creating digital experiences that are not just functional, but genuinely enjoyable.
Where do we even begin with something like this?
The Christian starts with a fundamental building block, typography across different screen sizes.
Makes sense. Got to make sure the text is readable no matter what device you're on.
Right. And he suggests aiming for a hierarchy of about 3 to 4 levels of headings and body text.
So like a visual roadmap guiding the user through the content.
Yeah, exactly. He's a big advocate for the mobile-first approach, too.
Smart. Design for the smallest screen first and then scale up.
And he even provides specific pixel and RM values as starting points for different screen sizes.
That's super practical. So designers don't have to start from scratch every time.
Absolutely. And by considering typography first, you ensure readability and consistency across all devices.
It's like laying a strong foundation for the whole user experience.
Now, another thing Christian really stresses is keeping navigation consistent across all devices.
Oh, that's so important. I hate it when I can't find things because the menus are different on my phone versus my laptop.
Right. He talks about keeping the wording, shape, and color of navigation elements as consistent as possible.
So even though the way the menu is displayed might change, like a hamburger menu on mobile versus a horizontal bar on desktop,
The underlying structure and the order of the items stay the same.
it's all about predictability, right? Users should be able to rely on finding things in the same place.
Precisely. And that sense of familiarity builds trust and reduces cognitive load.
They don't have to relearn how to navigate every time they switch devices. It just feels intuitive.
Okay, so have you ever been deep in a website and completely lost track of where you are?
Oh, all the time. Some websites are like digital mazes.
Christian has some great advice for that.
Okay, so how do we prevent users from getting digitally lost?
He recommends using breadcrumb trails.
Oh, yeah, those are helpful. They give you a sense of where you are in the hierarchy of the site.
Exactly. And he also suggests using step indicators, especially for multi-step processes.
That's a good one. It's reassuring to see where you are in a process and how much more you have to go.
Now, this next one might surprise you. It's about the number of steps or clicks it takes to reach a goal.
Oh, I'm guessing less is always better, right? Minimize the clicks, streamline the process.
You'd think so, but Christian actually challenges that assumption.
How so?
He says that while too many steps can definitely be frustrating, sometimes trying to cram everything into the absolute minimum can backfire.
I hadn't thought of that.
It can make the process so dense and confusing that users end up making more mistakes and taking more steps in the long run.
So it's about finding the right balance between efficiency and clarity.
Exactly. You want to make it as easy as possible for users to achieve their goals, but not at the expense of understanding.
It's like the difference between taking a shortcut that gets you lost and taking a slightly longer route that's clear and straightforward.
Okay, let's talk about content hierarchy for a moment.
How does Christian approach that?
He emphasizes putting the most crucial information right at the top of the page.
So users can immediately grasp what the page is about.
Yeah, front load the important stuff. Don't make them hunt for it.
Respect their time and make the content easily scannable. Makes sense.
Now let's shift gears to interaction design. Christian emphasizes the importance of consistent button placement.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely noticed that on websites I use frequently. The buttons are always in the same spot, so I don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. It's about building muscle memory and making the interface predictable. He also warns against placing primary actions right next to destructive ones.
Like having a save button right next to a delete button, that's asking for trouble.
Precisely. A little bit of separation can prevent a lot of headaches.
So consistent button placement reduces errors and makes the user feel more confident.
Along similar lines, Christian is a big advocate for layout consistency.
So like the same basic structure and order of elements on every page.
Exactly. It helps users quickly orient themselves and find what they're looking for.
And from a design perspective, it makes it much easier to create reusable templates.
Exactly. Consistent layouts benefit both the user and the design team.
It creates a sense of visual harmony and makes the website feel more cohesive.
Okay, this one is so often overlooked. Text links.
Oh yeah, those little hyperlinks that take you to other pages. What about them?
Christian emphasizes making it crystal clear which text is clickable and which is not.
So no more hiding links in paragraphs of text with no visual distinction.
Right. He suggests using meaningful link text, like Learn more about our services instead of just click here.
Much more descriptive and helpful for users. And for accessibility, too, right?
Absolutely. He also stresses the importance of visual cues, like underlining or sufficient color contrast.
Makes sense. Users need to be able to quickly scan a page and identify the links.
It's a small detail, but makes a big difference in usability, especially for people with visual impairment.
Clear link text helps them understand the context of your content.
Now let's talk about something fundamental: text size.
Okay, what's the magic number, according to Christian?
He recommends a minimum of 16 pixels for body text.
That's pretty standard, right? Most browsers use that as the default.
It is, and for good reason. It strikes a good balance between readability and screen space.
Too small, and it's a strain on the eyes. Too big, and it takes up too much space.
Christian's document also delves into the broader concept of design for accessibility, or A11Y for short.
Accessibility is crucial. We need to make sure our designs work for everyone, regardless of their abilities.
Absolutely. Christian lists a whole range of disabilities we need to consider, including auditory, visual, physical, and cognitive.
It's a good reminder that accessibility isn't just about one specific group. It's about designing for a diverse range of needs.
And he points to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines as a helpful framework.
Right. Those guidelines provide concrete standards and best practices for making digital content accessible.
Now think about how websites adapt to different screen sizes.
Responsive design, right.
Yeah,
The content reflows and adjusts to fit the screen.
exactly. And that brings up the importance of maintaining a logical content order, no matter how the content is displayed.
So, elements that are visually grouped together on a large screen should still make sense when they rearrange on a smaller screen.
Precisely. It ensures that the meaning and flow of the content are preserved, especially for users who rely on screen readers.
It's about creating a consistent experience regardless of device or assistive technology.
Another essential accessibility consideration is text contrast.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. If the text is too similar in color to the background, it can be almost impossible to read.
Moving on, let's talk about the importance of using clear section headings.
Headings are like the signposts of a web page, right? They guide you through the content.
Exactly. They provide structure, improve scannability, and help users quickly understand the hierarchy of information.
And for screen reader users, they make it much easier to navigate the page.
Christian points out that once those headings are defined in the code, you can then style them visually.
So you get both semantic meaning and visual appeal.
Now, here's a design consideration that often sparks debate: white text on dark backgrounds.
Ah, the dark mode dilemma. It looks cool, but can be tough on the eyes for some people.
Christian actually advises against using white text on dark backgrounds for large blocks of paragraph text.
Interesting. Why is that?
He says it can cause more eye strain for some people due to the way it stimulates the eye's color receptors.
I hadn't considered that physiological aspect.
So while dark mode can be great for certain elements or shorter bits of text, it might not be ideal for long-form reading.
Good to keep in mind. It's all about finding the right balance between aesthetics and readability.
When it comes to labels and headings, Christian stresses clarity and meaningfulness.
So no more vague or generic labels like click here or read more.
Exactly. He says labels should be descriptive, accurate, and concise, conveying the purpose of the content even when viewed out of context.
Like in a table of contents, for example. The heading should still make sense on its own.
Right. And this clarity is crucial for both usability and accessibility.
Users should never have to guess what something is or what it does.
Now here's a tip that might surprise you. Avoid using too many text abbreviations.
Really? But doesn't that save space, especially on smaller screens?
It does, but Christian argues the clarity and readability should take priority.
Makes sense. Abbreviations can be confusing, especially for users who might not be familiar with them.
And using full words also improves searchability and aligns with higher levels of accessibility guidelines.
So, while abbreviations have their place, we should use them sparingly.
Let's talk about those elements that aren't text: images and video.
Oh, those are tricky. How do we make sure they're accessible to everyone?
Christian stresses the absolute importance of providing text alternatives, also known as alt text.
So for users who can't see the image, the alt text describes what's there.
Exactly. And it's not just about describing the image literally, it's about conveying its purpose and meaning within the context of the page.
So, for example, if an image contains important text, that text should be included in the alt text.
Right. Or if an image is purely decorative, the alt text can simply indicate that.
It's all about providing a comparable experience for users who can't see the visual content.
Christian also advises against relying solely on hover interactions to reveal content.
Oh, like when you hover over an element and a tooltip pops up?
Yeah, that can be problematic for users who can't use a mouse or who rely on other assistive technologies.
They might miss out on that content entirely.
He recommends always providing an alternative way to access the content, like through a click or a tap.
So everyone has equal access to the information, regardless of their abilities.
Another key concept Christian highlights is affordances.
Affordances. Now that's a design term I haven't heard in a while. Remind me what that means.
It's all about those visual cues that indicate how something can be interacted with.
So a button should look like it can be clicked, a slider should look like it can be dragged.
Exactly. Those visual hints help users understand how to use an interface without needing explicit instructions.
It's about making the interface intuitive and self-explanatory.
Now, have you ever heard of Jacob's Law?
That one rings a bell. Refresh my memory.
It states that users spend most of their time on other websites and applications, so they come to expect your design to behave similarly.
So don't reinvent the wheel. Stick to established conventions.
Precisely. Users have built up mental models of how things work online, and by adhering to those conventions, you make your interface instantly more familiar.
It's like speaking the same language as your users.
All right, how about this scenario? You're filling out a long form online or waiting for a page to load.
Ugh, those waiting moments can be so frustrating. You just stare at the screen wondering if anything is happening.
Christian addresses that with the idea of workflow progress indicators.
So things like progress bars, loading spinners, step indicators,
Right.
anything that gives users a sense of where they are in the process.
Exactly. Those visual cues provide feedback and manage expectations, reducing uncertainty and anxiety.
It's like knowing how long a download will take or seeing how many steps are left in a checkout process.
It makes the whole experience feel more transparent and less frustrating.
It shows that you respect the user's time.
Now, when it comes to using color to convey information, Christian emphasizes a critical accessibility consideration.
Okay, what's the golden rule for using color accessibly?
You should always provide a textual alternative in addition to the color cue.
So if you're using color to distinguish different data points in a chart, you should also include text labels.
Exactly. That ensures that users with color vision deficiencies can still understand the information.
It's about providing multiple ways to access the same content.
Now, here's a principle that's applicable not just to design, but to decision-making in general. Hick's Law.
Okay, break that one down for me.
Basically, it states that the more choices you present to users, the longer it will take them to make a decision.
So simplifying choices can lead to faster and more satisfying user experiences.
Precisely. Less is often more, especially when it comes to presenting users with options.
It's about reducing cognitive overload and making it easier for users to make decisions.
All right, let's dive back into typography with a more specific consideration. Text line length.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that as a factor in readability.
Christian suggests aiming for a maximum of around 75 to 80 characters per line for body text.
So not too long and not too short. What's the reasoning behind that?
He explains that excessively long lines can make it tough for the eye to track to the next line, while very short lines can also be disruptive.
It's about finding that sweet spot for comfortable reading flow.
Exactly. And he even links to some in-depth research on optimal line lengths for different reading contexts.
Now that's attention to detail.
Next up, let's talk about the power of white space.
White space, you mean like empty areas on a page? Isn't that just wasted space?
Not at all. Christian emphasizes that white space, or negative space, is a crucial design element.
Really? How so?
It improves readability by giving elements room to breathe, it creates visual hierarchy, and it enhances focus.
I guess I never really thought of it that way.
He points to the Google homepage as a prime example. It's so clean and uncluttered.
Yeah, that's true. It's not crammed full of stuff.
The takeaway is, don't be afraid to embrace white space. It's not about emptiness, it's about visual clarity.
It's like the pauses in a conversation. They give you time to process what was just said.
Now, have you ever noticed those little animations and feedback mechanisms that respond to your actions on websites?
Oh yeah, like when you like a post and the heart icon animates, or when a button changes color when you hover over it.
Those are called micro-interactions, and Christian is a big fan of them.
They're delightful little details that make the interface feel more alive.
Exactly. They provide immediate feedback, encourage engagement, and add a touch of personality.
It's those subtle touches that make a big difference in the overall experience.
Now, Christian returns to the mobile-first design approach again, emphasizing its importance for prioritizing content and interactions.
Makes sense. When you start with the constraints of a small screen, you really have to focus on what's essential.
Exactly. And he recommends using design tools with features like auto layout and size tokens to efficiently scale up to larger screens.
So you can create a great mobile experience that seamlessly adapts to tablets and desktops.
Now let's talk about the words we use in our designs. UX writing.
Oh yeah, that's a whole art in itself. Finding the right words can make a huge difference in the user experience.
Christian advises using clear, concise language that feels natural and conversational, avoiding technical jargon whenever possible.
So write like you're talking to a friend, not writing a technical manual.
Exactly. And he gives a great example. Replacing a cryptic error message like invalid credentials with something more human-friendly like, oops, your email or password is incorrect.
It's a small change, but makes a big difference in how the user feels. It turns a potentially frustrating moment into a more helpful one.
When it comes to instructions, Christian reminds us not to rely solely on visual cues.
So always include clear text instructions as well, even if the action seems obvious visually.
Precisely. Not everyone perceives information in the same way, and text instructions can be crucial for accessibility.
It's about catering to different learning styles and abilities.
Now let's talk about error handling.
Oh, yes, those moments when things go wrong. How do we handle those gracefully?
Christian stresses the importance of robust error handling, both for accessibility and user experience.
So visually highlighting errors, providing clear error messages, and offering actionable guidance.
Exactly. Don't just point out the mistake. Help users understand what went wrong and how to fix it.
It turns a potential point of frustration into an opportunity for learning and recovery.
Now, here's a design principle you might recognize from other fields: the law of proximity.
Oh, yeah, that rings a bell. It's about how we perceive things that are close together, right?
Exactly. Christian reminds us that elements that are placed close together are naturally perceived as being related.
So, by grouping related buttons, form fields, labels, and so on,
You create logical associations, which makes the interface easier to scan and understand.
it's a simple but powerful way to organize information visually.
Now think about designing for touchscreens.
Yes, those tiny little targets we have to hit with our fingers.
Exactly. Christian highlights the importance of ensuring adequate touch target size.
So, making buttons and input fields big enough to tap easily.
Precisely. He mentions the material design guidelines, which recommend a target size of at least 48 by 48 pixels.
Makes sense. Nothing more frustrating than trying to tap a tiny button and accidentally hitting the wrong one.
And he points out that while hyperlinks might have smaller targets, they should be spaced out to avoid accidental taps.
Good point. It's all about minimizing those moments of frustration.
All right, let's move on to forms.
Forms can be such a pain point for users. How do we make them more enjoyable?
Christian emphasizes the importance of clear labels for all input fields.
So users know exactly what information they need to provide.
Right. And he's adamant that placeholder text within a field should never be used as a replacement for a proper, persistent label.
Makes sense. Placeholders disappear once you start typing, which can be confusing.
He points to both the W3C and the Nielsen-Norman Group as strong advocates for clear labels on form fields.
Those are some heavy hitters in the usability world.
Now imagine navigating a web page using only a keyboard.
Or with a screen reader. The focus moves from element to element in a specific order.
Exactly. And Christian emphasizes that this focus order should be logical and intuitive.
So it follows the natural flow of the content and doesn't jump around randomly.
Precisely. It's crucial for users who can't use a mouse or who rely on assistive technologies.
It ensures that everyone can access and understand the content in a meaningful way.
Have you ever been on a website and had to wait for something to load?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
Yet sometimes it feels like an eternity.
Christian talks about the importance of providing clear loading states to prevent users from getting frustrated.
So instead of just a blank screen, show a progress bar, a loading spinner, or at least a message saying loading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It manages expectations and lets users know that something is happening in the background.
It's like the difference between waiting for a bus with a timetable and waiting with no idea when the bus will arrive.
Christian includes a golden principle from usability expert Steve Krug. Don't make me think.
Ah, that's a classic. Keep things simple and intuitive.
Precisely. Interfaces should be self-explanatory. Users shouldn't have to struggle to figure out how to use them.
The less mental effort required, the better the user experience.
Now let's talk about color palettes.
Always a fun topic. What does Christian have to say about choosing colors?
He briefly mentions the 60-30-10 color rule as a guideline for creating balanced and visually appealing color schemes.
So 60% for a primary color, 30% for a secondary color, and 10% for an accent color.
That's the idea. It helps create visual harmony and a clear hierarchy of elements.
It's a good starting point for anyone who's not sure where to begin with color.
Christian also recommends limiting font choices to just 2 or 3 font families.
So one for headings, one for body text, and maybe one more for special emphasis.
Right, using too many fonts can create a cluttered and chaotic feel.
It's about keeping things simple and consistent.
Now this next one is about being considerate of the user. Timely data input requests.
Okay, what does that mean?
It's about asking for the right information at the right time and in the right way.
So don't bombard users with a huge form upfront. Ask for information as it's needed.
Exactly. It improves data quality and reduces user frustration.
It shows that you respect the user's time and attention.
Christian's document emphasizes the importance of both undoing errors and preventing them.
So giving users a way to back out of a mistake, but also designing interfaces that minimize the chance of errors in the first place.
Precisely. He recommends things like clear labels, helpful text, and confirmation dialogues for critical actions.
It's about creating a forgiving and supportive environment for users.
He also reminds us that recognition is easier than recall for human memory.
So it's better to show users familiar icons and labels than to make them remember things from scratch.
Exactly. It reduces cognitive load and makes the interface more intuitive.
It's like recognizing a familiar face in a crowd versus trying to remember someone's name.
When it comes to forms, Christian suggests using default values whenever possible.
Oh yeah, pre-filling fields with information we already know about the user.
It saves users time and effort, making the whole form filling process less tedious.
Little things like that can make a big difference in the user experience.
Now think about designing for a global audience.
Localization, right. Making sure our designs work for people who speak different languages and have different cultural norms.
Exactly. Christian reminds us to consider things like text expansion, avoiding text within images, and being mindful of cultural nuances.
So our designs need to be flexible enough to adapt to different languages and formats.
And we need to be sensitive to cultural differences in how colors and symbols are perceived.
It's about creating a truly inclusive experience for users around the world.
When designing for mobile, Christian highlights the importance of placing key actions within the natural thumb's reach zone.
So making sure those buttons and actions are easily accessible with one hand.
Precisely. It optimizes for comfortable one-handed use, which is how many people use their phones.
It's about ergonomics and making the interface feel natural to use.
Now think about those crucial moments where users are most likely to abandon a process, like an online checkout.
Ah, yes, the dreaded drop-off points. How do we keep users engaged and moving forward?
Christian suggests offering options like guest checkout or social logins to reduce friction.
So don't force users to create an account right away. Give them a streamlined path.
Exactly. You can always ask them to create an account later, once they've completed the crucial action.
It's about removing barriers and making the experience as smooth as possible.
Now, this next one might seem small, but it can have a big impact on user perception. Autoplay.
Oh yeah, those videos or audio clips that start playing automatically, sometimes that can be really jarring.
Christian advises being very careful with autoplay.
So always give users the option to pause or disable it.
Absolutely. It respects user preferences and prevents annoyance, and it's important for accessibility too.
Some users might be startled by sudden sounds, or they might not be able to easily find the controls to stop the autoplay.
Now, have you ever been on a website with those elements that stay fixed on the screen as you scroll?
You mean sticky elements, like a floating header or a sidebar that follows you down the page.
Exactly. While they can be useful in some cases, Christian warns against overusing them.
They can get in the way, right? Especially if they're covering up important content.
He says to use them strategically, only when they truly enhance the user experience.
It's about finding the right balance between helpfulness and intrusiveness.
Now think about the amount of information we present to users at once.
Information overload can be a real problem. How do we avoid overwhelming users?
Christian emphasizes the importance of finding the right balance between information density and visual design.
So don't cram too much onto a single screen. Break things up into manageable chunks.
He highlights the concept of progressive disclosure as a key strategy.
So start with the essential information and then gradually reveal more details as needed.
Exactly. It's about respecting the user's cognitive capacity and making the experience feel more manageable.
It's like unfolding a map one section at a time instead of trying to comprehend the whole thing at once.
Now, those little bits of text near interactive elements, like buttons or form fields.
You mean microcopy, those little hints and instructions that guide the user.
Exactly. Christian emphasizes the importance of crafting clear and helpful microcopy.
It's those small details that can make a big difference in clarity and usability.
It's about anticipating user questions and providing subtle guidance.
It's like having a little helper whispering tips in your ear.
When it comes to content, Christian advises against adding stuff solely for SEO purposes.
So don't stuff the page with keywords just to appease the search engines.
Right. Focus on creating valuable and relevant content for your users.
The search engines will eventually catch up, but your users will appreciate it right away.
Yeah. Those modal windows that pop up on top of the main content.
Oh yeah, this can be annoying if they're hard to close.
Christian stresses the importance of making modals easy to dismiss.
So provide a clear X button, enable the escape key to close them, and allow clicking outside the modal to dismiss it.
Exactly. Give users multiple ways out and don't trap them in a motor prison.
It's about giving users control and respecting their time.
Notification timing and placement are also crucial considerations, Christian notes.
So don't bury important notifications in obscure places or display them for too short a time.
Right. And consider users who rely on screen readers or have low vision.
Make sure notifications are clear, noticeable, and accessible to everyone.
When it comes to presenting users with a small number of choices, Christian has an interesting suggestion.
Okay, what's the advice for handling those short lists of options?
He says to avoid drop-down menus for lists with fewer than 5 options.
Really? What's the alternative?
Radio buttons. They make all the choices visible at once, reducing clicks and improving comprehension.
I could see how that would be more straightforward for users.
For interactive elements like buttons and links, Christian highlights the importance of indicating active states.
So visually showing when a button is being pressed or a link is being hovered over.
Exactly. It provides immediate feedback to the user and improves accessibility.
It also just makes the interface feel more responsive and polished.
For those critical actions that can't be undone, Christian strongly advises requiring confirmation.
So like asking users to type delete before deleting their account.
Exactly. It prevents accidental data loss and those, oh no, I didn't mean to do that moments.
It's a simple safeguard that can save a lot of heartache.
When you have a large amount of text, Christian recommends breaking it up into smaller sections.
So use clear headings, visual dividers, and plenty of white space.
Precisely. It makes the content more scannable and less intimidating for users.
It's like turning a wall of text into a well-organized library.
Now here's a thought-provoking idea. Christian encourages us to embrace problem-solving within limitations.
So instead of seeing constraints as obstacles, view them as opportunities.
Exactly. Limitations can actually spark creativity and lead to more innovative solutions.
It's like the saying, necessity is the mother of invention.
When you encounter those empty states, like an empty inbox or a blank search results page,
Those can be opportunities to guide users and inject some personality into the design.
Christian suggests offering helpful tips, suggestions, or even a touch of humor.
Turn a potentially dull moment into a more engaging and helpful experience.
And finally, even for small projects, Christian recommends creating mini design systems.
So define a consistent set of colors, spacings, icons, and typographic styles.
It ensures consistency, saves time, and makes it easier to scale the design later.
It's about establishing good design habits from the start, even for smaller projects.
So, there you have it, a deep dive into practical design micro-learnings, all thanks to the insights of Christian Slegtenhorst, expert.